You've probably seen the headlines, right? A campus protest goes viral, and immediately everyone picks a side. Was it about free speech, or was it a total meltdown? But what if everybody missed the real story? Today, we are diving deep into a fascinating theory that says the root of this conflict wasn't political at all. It was chemical.
So, the article we're looking at today frames the incident at Tennessee State University on September 24, 2025, as something much bigger than a debate that got out of hand. It calls it a total system failure. And that one phrase right there, system overload, that changes everything.
And that's really the core of what we're digging into today. The theory put forward is, well, it's fascinating and honestly, a little unsettling. It suggests that this whole thing wasn't really driven by what people believed, their ideology, but by hidden environmental and, yes, chemical factors.
Okay, so first, let's just quickly recap what most people saw, right? You have this really tense standoff, and immediately it gets framed in one of two ways. Either it's a free speech violation or it's a campus having a total meltdown. But according to this theory, that whole way of looking at it, it's missing the single most important piece of the puzzle.
So, to really get what might have been going on, the analysis says we have to put the politics aside for a second and start with chemistry. Yeah, chemistry. Specifically, two incredibly common but really potent chemicals that a lot of us are exposed to every single day without even thinking about it.
So the first one is a chemical called coumarin. And get this, it was originally developed as a rat poison. Today, though, it's an unregulated ingredient in tons of personal care products. It gets absorbed right through your skin, and the source material makes a point of highlighting how it's used disproportionately in cosmetics marketed specifically to Black communities.
And the thing is, it's hiding in plain sight. We're talking hair products, fragrances, lotions, even the air fresheners in your car. When you start to add it all up, you realize this isn't just a little contact here and there. For a lot of young people, this becomes a state of chronic, daily exposure to a known neurotoxin.
All right, the second chemical is something most of us definitely have in our medicine cabinet, acetaminophen, the main ingredient in Tylenol. But the research cited in the article says it does a lot more than just stop a headache. It can actually blunt our emotional responses, reduce our empathy for others, and even make us more likely to take risks.
But here's where things get really serious. It's not just about one or the other, it's the combination. The article argues that these two substances together create a kind of perfect storm. You've got coumarin working the body's detox system overtime, and at the same time, acetaminophen is weakening its defenses. The end result? A body and a brain that are just completely overwhelmed, leading to what the author calls neurochemical volatility.
So you might be wondering, how does neurochemical volatility actually turn into the kind of behavior we saw on camera? Well, the explanation starts with the direct assault on the body's central command center, that crucial connection between our gut and our brain.
You see, a healthy gut-brain axis is what helps keep our moods and impulses in check. But when it gets all thrown out of whack by these chemicals, it can cause something called neuroinflammation. And what does that look like on the outside? We're talking more anxiety, more irritability, and terrible impulse control. The body is basically biologically wired for a fight.
And this just completely reframes the whole problem, doesn't it? Suddenly, we're not just looking at bad behavior or another mental health crisis. The argument here is that we are literally witnessing the neurological symptoms of what the article calls a legally permitted biochemical assault on a whole generation. Okay, so that chemical load is one massive piece of this puzzle. But there's another piece. The next part of the theory explores how cultural conditioning and the media we consume can trigger a kind of pre-programmed, almost automatic response, especially in a population that's already biochemically vulnerable.
This brings us to a really key distinction the author makes between two kinds of protest. On one hand, you have strategic resistance. That's goal-oriented. It has a plan. But on the other hand, you have symbolic reaction, and that's emotional, it's triggered, and a lot of the times it's really just a performance for the cameras. The analysis is pretty clear that it sees the TSU incident as a perfect example of that symbolic reaction, a performance designed to go viral, not to create actual change.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem with how this whole thing was covered, right? It didn't matter if you were watching left-wing or right-wing news, every single outlet focused on the ideological fight. They completely missed what the article calls the biochemical variable. And by doing that, all they really did was pour gasoline on a fire of division.
Okay, so this is where it all comes together. All the different threads. The chemicals, the stress, the media manipulation, they all tie into this one final, powerful analogy. And it's an analogy to a famous and, frankly, pretty chilling scientific experiment from back in the 1960s.
The experiment was nicknamed the mouse utopia. Imagine this. Scientists gave these mice everything they could possibly need. Food, water, a safe place to live, no predators, a perfect world. But even with all of that, the whole society collapsed into chaos, aggression, and just apathy. And the reason? It wasn't a lack of resources. It was overcrowding and overstimulation. The scientist, John Calhoun, he called this phenomenon the behavioral sink.
And this is the big provocative comparison the article makes. It argues that today's youth are basically living in a human version of that mouse utopia. They're dealing with digital overcrowding, constant cultural overstimulation, and this relentless barrage of neurotoxic chemicals. It's trapping them in a very similar kind of behavioral sink.
So when you put it all together, the toxic environment, the chemical load, the cultural programming, the argument isn't that this was a political protest in the way we usually think about it. No, it's something way deeper. It's a fundamental collapse of emotional resilience.
So after laying out this whole pretty heavy theory, the article doesn't just end there by pointing fingers. It actually wraps up not with blame, but with a challenge. It's an invitation to completely shift the conversation we're all having.
And this might be the single most important message of the whole piece. We are so conditioned to see every single conflict through a political lens, right? But what if we need to look past all that? What if we need to look at the physiological reality of what might be happening to an entire generation? So, instead of just arguing about left versus right, the article calls for a totally different conversation. A conversation about health versus harm. A debate that asks the real questions, like what chemicals are actually in the products we use every day? How are they affecting our brains, our empathy, our ability to just connect with each other? And maybe the biggest question of all, what's our shared responsibility in all this? What are we going to do to fix it?
And that leaves us with one last really provocative thought to chew on. What if we just read the whole event wrong? What if what we all saw wasn't an act of political defiance at all, but was more like a flare being shot into the sky? A desperate warning from a generation that's cracking under the pressure of a silent, invisible biochemical load?